to call upon the person who is going to be moderating this part. Yes, I'm sorry, it's not going to be me. Thank you. Please help me welcome Mr. Beren van der Lans, please, for African Architecture Matters.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm not Hervé. I can't be as funny as Hervé. This afternoon, well, I'm Berend van der Lans. Well, I'm introduced, and you can read about African architecture matters in the book. So we want to hurry up, so I'm not going to say anything about it. This afternoon we look at projects within Africa and outside of Africa that provides cultural space in cities and urban environments. And we have a few very interesting projects that we want to present to you, and the initiators, the people behind the projects are with us. So it's actually fantastic that they are here. On the one hand, to tell you what they have done and achieved, what their successes are, but also what their challenges are and what they are struggling with. And I think it's also for them hopefully very interesting to be here together to exchange amongst themselves. The first presentation is by Joy Mbodia from Godan Arts Institute, Godan Arts Center in Nairobi. This is a fantastic incubating space in an industrial, well, former industrial area in Nairobi. Can I invite Joy to come here and start telling us what the successes are? If you can use this, or you can use that, whatever you want.
Yeah, this particular performer did not turn the mic on. Okay, so we're on a clock, so I will try and see how much I can share in 15 minutes. But I think that the morning's conversation is an excellent kind of conversationalist with this particular project. The things that the artists from Rwanda were speaking about are exactly the same things that we worried about and spoke about and still speak about, but less so, 16 years ago. So I'm Joy Mboya, as has been mentioned. I'm the executive director at the Godan Arts Center, which is based in Nairobi. We are 16 years old now, so that's quite old for an arts organization apparently in the region. And we actually have a story of probably building twice. And so I'd just sort of like to share what that twice building means, and as Berend has indicated, the challenges and the opportunities that we've seen and the lessons that we've learned and the process that we've taken. Again, I'm just wondering whether this can be slightly dimmed just so that we can see the slide if the lighting technician is there. Okay, but the red dot that you see on the bottom there, that's the Godan Arts Center. You can see that to the north of it is the Central Railway Station, and then just north of the railway station is the Central Business District of Nairobi. So that's what we call downtown. And then, of course, south, the industrial area off to the bottom left, the bottom right, depending on how you're looking at it over there. And then around it actually is a lot of residential areas. So that stadium that you see to the top, that is the city stadium, and around that city stadium is some of the original African housing that was now allowed to exist legitimately in the city of Nairobi. And then the other stadium down there is a more recent stadium. And these two stadiums are actually in conversation as people move through soccer in a weekend. And we see ourselves sitting in an interesting space around sports, historical center, and then of course the emerging arts activities that are happening around us and some that have preceded us. So the first phase, so I'm calling this phase one. So the first phase of sort of building, I think, was similar to what we heard Rwanda discuss, which was that the artists were now really needing to find a footprint in the space, in the city. But the footprint was, yes, a physical space for training, for meeting audiences, for networking, for encountering each other. but also, of course, this idea of the philosophical space, the mental space, just the mindset that allows that artists and culture are valid and should be part of the business of community life. So we went through that same question. Looking for a space then was actually not easy. Again, you come with presumptions. Being middle class, one presumed that those who were conversing with me, who were also middle class, that the best places to situate these things were the territories that we occupied. And it turned out that those were very hard to find, and actually that was not necessarily the right space. So after a search of about 2 years, somebody said to us, how about the industrial area? There are warehouses over there that are empty, why don't you find something there? And so we did look, and we found one warehouse, which then did not work out, and then we found a second warehouse. And of course, then the conversations began around whether these spaces are suitable for the arts, whether the industrial area is even safe in the evening for performances, and the whole question of access and the Nairobi traffic. But we soldiered on and moved into this space, which I'll just show you. Am I moving correctly there? Okay, I've done something wrong. I'm a Mac person, so I don't know what I've done here. I think I hit that one rather than this one. Okay, there it comes, it pops up again. All right, I'll keep my fingers on the right one. Okay, so this is the warehouse that we found. The plan or site plan at the bottom there is the area that we first occupied. And the sort of larger rectangle that you see in the middle of the space is that warehouse that you see on the top left over there. And then surrounding it were these sort of lean-to sheds that, if you look at the image at the bottom, the image to the left, furthest left, the sheds all looked that way. They were partly walled up. In there was industrial pieces, car parts, and it was completely run down. It had been unused for about 2 years. So, of course, when we came into the space, somebody said, so you think you can fix Beirut? And we said, well, we've got to give it a go. So slowly but surely we began to renovate the space, but to renovate the space in a way that allowed multiple uses. The structure of these lean-to sheds is that basically every 5 meters you have a post, you have a pillar. And so we use those as the kind of modular language for all of the units that then surround the main performance space. The funding came because at that particular point in time, 2002, 2003, there was a funder in the region who was keen to see how to widen the democratic space through arts and culture. I think, as Carol was indicating, we tend to grab onto wherever the resources come from, and sometimes that means that we have to message in the direction of the resource. So this was really around freedom of expression, which was not as restrictive as do a play for AIDS or do a play about the girl child. It was around freedom of expression, and so you could actually use it for whatever experimental artistic expression you wish to work in or work with. The Ford Foundation, very specifically, was the funder who enabled us to actually renovate the space, and then after about 3 years, we made it clear to them that these sorts of experiments are unsustainable because we were a tenant in the space, and the rent was going up every 2 years by 20%, and very soon this idea would be dead. So they said that actually they would be interested in giving us a legacy grant to own the space, and this was unusual and has not happened since in the Kenya space. So 2005, we were then able to negotiate purchase, and once we became an owner, I think our mindset also changed. We felt that we were proprietors in the city. We could do a lot more things with the building. We could vision for culture in the city a lot more confidently than being a tenant who was living off of donor funding. So after that sort of security, if I can call it that, one of the things that we also learned in the process of now programming the space was that the artist community in Kenya can speak with a loud voice, and that that loud voice did not always represent the reality. And the reality was that even though we had been agitating for a space where, of course, we could train and work, but also importantly a space that we could program for audiences, the consistency of output, of creative output of plays and dance, and visual arts exhibitions that was coming out of the artist community actually needed more time and work. And so as we were programming, sometimes things would be fantastic, sometimes they would be abysmal. And so this affected the sort of audience presence that we were seeing. But then beyond that, I think, the space was new. The whole idea of having a kind of an art space that people came to, separate from the National Theatre that, you know, had been there since the colonial times, was a question for many. Is this space open to us? What kind of people come to this space? We're seeing a lot of expatriates coming to this space. So we then had to do what I call the transition and begin to learn the city. And by learning the city, we were trying to learn city audiences or city residents. We moved away from the language of audience, actually. We said, we're all living in a city. We all have things that we like that are either recreational or creative or artistic in some way. Can we begin to understand what are those things that Nairobians love? Where do they love to see them? And can we meet them where they are, in addition to trying to program the space? So one of the things that we then started was a city festival. It first started as community festivals in the various neighborhoods of Nairobi. And it was interesting for us to see just how we behave when a stage is put up in the neighborhood. It's a Saturday, you start at noon, you'll probably end at 6, and the different audiences that come through. So noon, young people, always there, predominantly men, young men, and music and poetry and rap or whatever is happening. As you go into the afternoon, you begin to see the women and the young girls pitch up. The time's a little bit freer now. And by the time you're getting to the end of the performances, you've actually got more of a mixed crowd. So we sort of said, okay, so is that what was happening to the women? But anyway, it began to give us a sense of how are people occupied on a weekend when we thought we were actually programming. So that was one of the things that we did, which was a festival. The other thing that we did, of course, was partnering with a firm of architects from Stockholm. We also began to look at the question of city identity and culture in the built space. So the whole question of sustainable urban development, working and doing workshops with planning officials, with other professionals in the building industry, with students and with residents and with artists, just trying to get a handle of how do people perceive the city, public space, streets, and very specifically that orange line that you see in the image on the left there, with the box at the bottom in the white space that goes all the way up through the railway station into the city centre. That is a major pedestrian thoroughfare that runs outside the go-down, and so we began to sort of look at that as a case study in terms of how do we work with people and walkthroughs to begin to understand how they see this space and how that could be used by the architects in terms of design. Okay, so I got that right. So then this next image then is our phase 2 of now rebuilding the go-down. So then the go-down is built. We're now sort of 10, 12 years in. We started the festival in 2013. The festival is giving us great insights into the city and its residents. We've been doing the workshops with the architects, and these are all, again, solidifying our networks with city officials and residents, and other agencies like the UN Habitat, who actually supported an investigation that we did with the architects around the whole railway city area, and actually developed a sort of a structural plan for that area as well. We then inserted ourselves in the conversations that were happening in developments around the go-down. So one was the railway city plan. The other is connected to the railway city plan, which was just an awareness of developments of offices south of the railway city. Around us, there had been a small kind of street that was recreational, and again, it was getting more and more activities there. A shopping center had opened over there, a radio station was there was a club over there, and we began to think about what some of these things might mean in relation to the go-down as well. And the car company from which we purchased the property in the end was also now bought out by a Dubai firm, and they were about to enter into building. So we went into a second round of workshopping people. Did that move? Yes. And, oh, something's missing there. Okay, there's an image that's disappeared. But this time we were now talking about how do people feed in ideas to rebuild the go-down? What do they want to see in the new go-down? And again, there was extensive information that was shared. Now, this morning you heard the architect who presented sort of say, well, if that is the brief, I don't know how an architect's going to translate that. But we had exactly the same question. Everybody had different ideas. We were workshopped by a fantastic woman architect who works with a community in Nairobi, who helped us go through a process of trying to understand those sensibilities, those aesthetic things that the architects might pick up on that would help to give body to the building. Now, the things that came out of that were really interesting, and some of them, I think, were expressed in the presentation that Professor Loko made, and some of them in the morning, which was that the Nairobians or Kenyans want to see diversity in visually, that things don't look the same. They don't like things that are linear, and they're not afraid of something being big and small at the same time, rough and smooth at the same time. Dynamism was mentioned, that things are dynamic, things are fluid, things are interchangeable. Animate was another quality that was mentioned, that things are living, that these things, they're not dead, they're not static, it's not just a space that is a space. That things have impact, that things have presence, that things are there. And then finally, that things have stories and meaning. So these are the sensibilities that the architects were then struggling to work with in order to try and give form and shape to the new go-down. Of course, these are being done with artists, so that the vision, and this is really an early one, this has since changed, is a building that is working with those dimensions and beginning to draw histories and stories from the Kenyan space, which are translated into the facade and in the courtyards and in all of the spaces of this building. So while it looks like a rectangle at this particular point in time, the layers that inform its creation and its shape have actually come from those particular consultations. When I shared this with, and this is the last thing that I'll say, when I shared this with the PS for Culture, as we were now trying to fundraise through the ministry and everybody, she said, but Joy, first of all, why would you put this thing in the industrial area, and are Kenyans ready for this? And I said to her, this thing was dreamt up by the stakeholders that use this space and that live around this space. And we should not be afraid of what we dream of. So are you telling me that we should not imagine and then realize our imagination? And so for me, this is what this represents. The next stage is really, how do we imagine this, but then how do we sustain it at home? And I guess that will be the Q&A that comes in, because the whole strategy for funding this is, again, another exercise in nation-making, is what I call it, and moving away from a donor-funded model to a model that now works for us at home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Joy. I think it's a very inspiring example, and I'm sure that there are questions and you want to know how this is all possible. Note them down, your questions, and you can ask them later when we have the panel discussion, and tomorrow we will discuss further. So let me now invite Paul Dujardin to the stage. He is already for the second time today. Paul is heading the Beaux-Arts, a fantastic cultural center in Brussels. And yeah, how does it work?
So maybe first question, who in the room was already visiting this building? So it's good to know. So the students, who are the students in the room? Three groups. I see that everybody's sitting together from the three groups. It's interesting. It's also sociology. So my presentation that I made together with my staff and my team, together with Kathleen, I would suggest that we send it to all of you, and even you would have questions today or later, send it to us, and we'll try to give you answers in the near future as soon you would be interested by more. but you will find a lot on a digital platform. It's a building of the 20s, and interesting, it's the most anti-Bilbao against all fetishism of architecture, because 65% of the building is under the ground on a hill. You have downtown, uptown, and behind that building, in the urban development of Brussels, you have the Royal Palace, and the urbanists wanted to give for the power a vision on the city. So they had to excavate in the hill, and they brought this building in the hill. So it seems to be a small building, but it's about 35,000 square meter in the building. So it's a city in the city, and you have to discover. And so it's not the architecture was important, it was really the monumentality of what, of the inside, just all the way around from many of the buildings of today. It's a house of change. We have about 100 years. If we think about reconciliation and Rwanda, it's the same for us. You know, history is repeating itself always. And when the building was conceived, Belgium was second economy in the world, competing against the UK. We at the end of the First World War, 18 million people died. Most important part of that war was nearby Brussels. And it was the women, when even women were not elected in parliament, who convinced families to build that building, to heal. And I think that's everything set. And so that's the project of Beaux-Arts. So it was not too difficult for me that after 100 years to come back to these origins, from what is the finally mission of an institute as Beaux-Arts, but any place you need to work from inside of this project, and even more today as Brussels is the European capital and seen from outside as something very bureaucratic. We will never be in London or Paris. It's a small city, 1.2 million, but in my neighborhood where I'm living, around my apartment, 1 square kilometer round, the large of the Forbidden City in Beijing, we speak 162 languages. And it's the poorest and the most dense area from the European Union. About 95,000 people live in that 1 square kilometer. So to give the context of what is Brussels also, if you don't know it, it's a very cosmopolitan city. It's a transit city of a lot of migrants coming through Brussels, and certainly in the neighborhood I'm living. It's less than 1 mile from this art center. And we opened it up for all the different communities, and that's why when Kathleen and myself, we started to work, since the beginning Africa was a part of the project during the colonizing period. It was the first exhibition, was Russian avant-garde, et l'art nègre, was the first exhibition 100 years ago. But we thought that we had a place of change in the global world we are living in today. I said it already, it became a city, an open place for these who came to the different projects we produced for the last 10 years with all the communities of the Afro-descendants. We prioritized to these different communities. You know, in Europe, we could think that 40 million Europeans are from African descent. So it's a real community of artists and intellectuals who live in Europe and wants to be respected in a form of co-creation and collaboration. So that's interesting to see that after the Second World War, because we don't learn anything, when we destroyed Europe, we did it again some years later with the Second World War. Strange enough, when this war ended, it was never really ended because the Soviet Union, it went on. We will have the 75th anniversary of the end of the war with the Russians in 2020. It will be fundamental momentum in the European space. And I speak about the Council of Europe. The European space is not limited to the European Economic Union, where we are 27 today, and the 29th of March we will be 27, as you know. And you saw Mrs. May already on the screen this morning. This is 1958, 30 years after the war. and giving a totally other perspective from what was the future of a country and a world between globalization, capitalism and communism at that time. And that was innovation in the first place. And then the question is, what is creativity in innovation? In a place as Beaux-Arts, fundamental element in the discussion. And that's, I think, the most important slide. We wrote hundreds of pages about our mission and vision and values we want to share. That's one slide with the summary of this whole book, what we want to be today. I think that art centers, the diamond in the middle, is the interdisciplinary approach for what an art center can be today, and where you have this gray zone where artists meet from different disciplines. And on that way it becomes a more, in a certain way, we name it more intersectoral way. How you sit together even between the systems, how you think about systems in the arts from a part of, point of view of ideology. So the economic system. And now as an art activist, you sit together with a funder, with a foundation, with a banker. You need to talk to them and you have to show also a form of empathy. Urbanists, mayors, politicians. And that's important to be in a dialogue with them. So this way is, you need to come to this way of an intersectoral and these elements of, who are all related to a program today in an art institution where we can dream of with all the problems we have every day. And Beaux-Arts as an economic actor will not go in details. We heard it this morning from the head of delegation of the European Union, how important cultural industries are, not only in Europe, all over the world. And certainly in Africa, the cultural industries are not the big companies. It's a lot of very small SMEs. So it's an important part of the debate we have today in Beaux-Arts. And even all what we do in research on that level, mobility related to the structure of organization we have there. That's the sculpture hall where we do our innovation projects, all what is related to innovation. And so Beaux-Arts as a political institution, we couldn't avoid being in Brussels, that it would not be only a platform of diversity, but also the whole discussion related to the global world where we're in and development. What is the concept of development today? And that's an important part of the whole discussions that we have with artists coming in this discussion, not only North and South, South for South, and I think a fundamental element of co-creation in the project we did in the recent years. In search of new narratives, it's a basic element, the way we have this discussion of migration inside the European Union and the borders of Europe, in the way we are looking from our side and our perspective to build new bridges. And it's a fundamental question also in the morning discussion. I thought I learned a lot that the danger that Europe is looking to themselves more than looking with the world in which they are living in. And so this is one of the spaces we transformed the museum in an open space for innovation in the format of discussion, the way we're sitting around to discuss all these different matters related not only to urbanity, but all the ethical questions we have questioning today. And this part is that it's not easy when you have a very large cultural heritage, Europe or Africa, how you deal with this heritage. It's the same for us. For some countries in Europe, it's more difficult. Belgium is as such, yes, it's a small kingdom, but related to the Low Countries, because my colleague is from the Netherlands, and I told him it's not as such so interesting to see Belgium or Netherlands, it's more related to the delta, it's rivers. And we separated each other, the Netherlands 600 years ago, but we never married. It was 600 years ago we separated because it was the first start of the 80 years of war between Catholics and Protestants. And that was a decision where made this whole destruction, we can say, philosophically wise, France and Germany were making war for 1,000 years on cultural issues related to religion. And so the element of engaging and trying to understand is an important part related to the independence of artists, but the way we're looking to this. And there's a danger for Europe that we would be much more related to this inside reflection than the way with the other. We're looking to the other. There are many projects related to the community work. This is a project we named Singing Brussels. We Traders, United Music of Brussels, where we go in different neighborhoods. That's with the more European part of the city where we work. That's Molenbeek. You know, the Europeans do not know in my mother language, who's Flemish, Dutch. They only know 2 words in Flemish, but they do not, from all of the world, but they do not know mostly the meaning. It's Molenbeek. It was the small village nearby the river where we had the terrorist attack, and the second word is apartheid. The 2 Flemish words are world renowned, Molenbeek and apartheid. And this is the neighborhood where also is becoming like a zoo. Everybody wants to visit that area to see how the complexity of living together in cities today. And it's not only the problematic of Brussels, it's not only the European cities. I had already this experience when I was a student in America, how these small cities, the center is in the periphery, and now people were pushing out of the center in the gentrification of cities. It's an interesting debate also to have. This is all, many of our activities. It was interesting to this morning with the artists here living in Kigali. We tried to do this difficult exercise having already the building. That's the great thing we have today, but that we mixed. Finally, we had the other discussion the other way around. We needed to be out of the building. So we started to be more in the community than in our own building. That's a part under the street. We renovated a part. It's not in the building, it's under the street. That's a certain number of elements of what is Beaux-Arts today. Again, we were modestly co-organizing this event, but we are not the event. The event are you. I'm not here to give lessons. It's only to learn from you. It's important that we can share, and that certainly the element of co-creation is a fundamental element. So I think I would like to to bring the discussion of the artist in the center than only the cultural entrepreneur. We have to I'm at that level an activist, but at the end it's the artist who makes things happen in the narratives. And so I hope that visiting Kigali and sharing my experience to the administration, the bureaucrats, in the good, noble way of what is bureaucracy is democracy, how we have the only representative of the public authorities on the first row here, how we can make this dialogue open between artists, students, and making that to a good dialogue to make really results. So thank you, and I'm staying here for 3 days. I hope that I can meet more people to exchange our experience and that I can go back to tell more to my staff and my colleagues in Brussels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul Dujardin. Now we go back to Africa, and it's a great pleasure to invite Marilyn Douala-Bell, Princess Marilyn Douala-Bell, to the stage. She runs for over 25 years a fantastic art platform in Douala, with a lot of meaning to the city of Douala itself. Now we have to struggle a bit.
We need some help. Good afternoon. They were all told for me. I need some help. Thank you. So I don't know if I will speak in English or in French, maybe both, because I'm on my A's in French, but I'd like to improve my English. So forgive me for the faults and so on. So I'm where? I was supposed to put some pictures and so on. I'm going to speak with you about our project, which is involved in art, spaces, and citizenship. Art, espace, et citoyenneté in Douala. I have created with my husband, who passed away 5 years ago, unfortunately. He was the artistic director, a center, a contemporary art center, which is called Doual Art. Doual for the city of Douala, and art for art activism. And there is, let's say, three words we can define the work we are doing. We are like, in French we say dispensaire. It's not an hospital, but it's a place where you come and take some curation to be, we take care of people, of artists, and we also expanded outside. So a dispensaire in French is a place where people come to be curated, and at the same time it's a place from where we can curate outside and give some power to people. The second word which can define the work we are doing is about we want to be a platform where people meet, a platform where creation is coming, a platform where a new way of thinking us as Cameroonian and our place in the world, a platform where we can define ourselves in another way. And the third word is we work as a laboratory, a laboratoire. Then the work we are doing is dedicated to enhance knowledge for people in the field, knowledge for artists, the second, we are also dedicated to underline and promote our contemporary identity, underline and promote. And also, we work in a way, we try to work in a way for impulsing citizenship. Doing so, for that, we work in 2 areas. I don't speak about spaces, areas. We have our venue, which is Espace Doual Art. Doual Art is based in Douala. We were born in 1991, but the spaces we get in 1995. It belongs to my family. I'm from this family. We had a lot. We have nothing more than this building now. It's the castle of King's Bell. And this was the first cinema of Douala. That part was built in 1930, I think, something like that, because my father went there when he was young, and he was born in 1927. So, and this venue, it's a venue, is a place where we do organize a lot of exhibition, let's say about 8 to 10 a year. We do organize a lot of conferences, workshops. We have a library, and so most of the exhibitions are coming from contemporary artists, and we do privilege the art which is like an experimental one. This is the venue. And it was at the beginning the cinema, as I told. We have asked to an architect in Douala, a very famous architect, to come and help us to redesign the space. And the artists were used at the beginning to call it the cathedral. Because in Douala we have 3 venues, and this is one of the most alive. It's like poumon, no, the heart of the city has a very dynamic space where people can come meet together and also discover new arts. New art. I want about our way of financing. We have a garden where there is a cafeteria, and we also, I put it somewhere, we also rent a space sometimes if the renter is someone interesting and the project is interesting. We also sell a little art pieces, not so much, because there is no market, there is no débouché in Cameroon for that. And nowadays, we are really thinking about how to do it, and we are thinking about creating a boutique, a store, a shop, a shop where we could sell derivative products, and also we are thinking about a collaboration with other actors, cultural actors in our surrounding, because we think that we can't do things by our own. We have to work with the others in collaborative way of doing, because they do have some experiences, skills, and so on that we don't, and we have things that they don't have, so we work together. And one of the ideas is to open the space to designers, to young designers, to give them visibility and to help them to create new models, new objects, new products, and we will maybe help them to sell those products in small series. This is the venue of Doual Art, Espace Doual Art, and we work a lot outdoor. And the question of space is, for us, in different levels. The venue, I spoke about that, but also the city as a space where we can work a lot. And we have created a festival 12 years ago, which is called Sud, Salon Urbain de Douala, making the city of Douala a salon, where people can speak together, live together, and so on. And with this festival, we can raise a lot of money, a lot, not enough, but a lot. And during those 12 years, we have offered about 80 events and art pieces in the city of Douala. And this, for example, is a performance from an artist, a Cameroonian artist, and she created a space around her. This is a space. This is a space where artists and people can meet. They couldn't dialogue because it was a silent performance. But it was about the last edition of our festival, which was about the human dimension. What is our human dimension? So outdoor, with this festival, we have offered those pieces of art in public space. Can be in the center of the city, but it can also be in the neighborhoods where people never go. The bourgeoisie never go. The patriots never go. The one who manages the public authorities, they never go there. So we work in those different areas, and we organize for the city as a space a lot of tours, guided tours, to make people have, and this is a second space, this mental geography of the city, and this is a space, and we want people to dream their city and to know that there is, wow, something new there, oh, there is something there, and then they have a new way of thinking their own place in those spaces, mental spaces, mental geography. Physical space, so this is an example of what we are doing. The site before, the site after, it's a place in a neighborhood, no man's land. They had nothing, they have nothing. They have no water, they have no electricity, nothing. But now they have a theater, and they're really proud of that. And this theater is not just an architecture. It has been done by a Belgian sculptor, and this is not a place which has been created. This is a platform open to other artists. And the most important, one of the most important things is how you open the doors. There are three very important dimensions. One is to create and repair a space which is completely abandoned and dangerous, and how this space for people inside the neighborhood can have free speeches, have their own space, their own place, have expression, and particularly youth, and how they can discover performances and so on, how this is part of the education. And this is in another neighborhood, and it's about a project which has been done by an artist, and this is very interesting because it opened the eyes of adults on the way the new languages in Cameroon, which is in the youth, for the youth, the Cam Franglais, Cameroonian, French, and English speaking. It's Cam Franglais, and it is the translation in Cam Franglais of different articles of the Human Declaration, la Déclaration universelle des droits de l'homme, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so then also about that, the way the artist works, and this is a dialogue. This is very interesting also as space, the space of consultation, the space of dialogue, which is not open in our country. And by this project about expression given to kids from artists on the human rights, the place of the human dimension, we had opened this conversation with the mayor of Douala. And it was very interesting because we had worked with schools and kids, and this mural is in one of the schools where we worked. And by the end, at the opening of our festival, last edition, the kids said, we want to speak to the mayor. We want to explain to him, to tell him what kind of right we want to be open for us. And then they decide to speak, to have a speech. And it was very interesting because they had this opportunity to speak in front of him, and the mayor now is asking us, Douala Art, to work with the city council in the neighborhood where they want to resettle. And they understood, the mayor understood that it's very interesting and important for the new settlement to have part given, opened by the artist, to create links, artist mediation. And those links between people is new spaces are creating for themselves to be, to have this ability to think together and to look in the same direction, even if they are not agreeing about what to do, they are looking in the same direction. And this is the way we are working on the field. So shaping a space or a venue is not the objective. It's not the objective to shape, but the main questions are what for who, with whom, and about the sustainability. And the city, the mayor, decided we offer now some prestation de service, so we rent our skills for the city, and we are thinking also about new ways of financing, de nouvelles manières de nous financer, parce que nous sommes en train de travailler, we are working for our sustainability, and we don't want to be dependent now on grants or subsidies coming from outside our country. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Within time also. It's going well now. Then now we go to a very special project in relation to what we have been working on this week. I would like to invite Theo Lawson from Lagos to the stage. Theo is the driver, founder, initiator of Lagos Freedom Park. Lagos Freedom Park is a park for culture in the space of a former prison. And there's a special story about it, but I'm sure he's going to tell.
Good evening, everybody. Greetings from Lagos, most populous city of the most populous nation, or most populous nation in Africa. And Africa is the center of the world, as we all know. So, let me move on. Freedom Park essentially was created in concept was initially evolved in 1998 by a group of architects who felt Lagos required some new thinking. But let's go back into the history. Let's go back a step and look at the history of Lagos. In 1851, the British bombarded Lagos and chased out the king at the time, Oba Kosoko. He was chased out to Ekpe, and they installed his cousin, or his uncle, Adele, who Kosoko had previously overthrown himself. When Adele came back in, 2 years later he died mysteriously, and his son, Dosumu, in 1861 was forced to sign the Treaty of Lagos, where he handed over Lagos and all its royalties and land and everything to the British, to the Queen, to be precise. And this was under the threat of gunboats under another round of bombardment, which they had witnessed 10 years before. So within that period of time, immediately the British took control of the island. Lagos, essentially this is Lagos Island. You can see the British interests were essentially along the southern coastline where they had access to the ports, and the natives were on the northern side. And there's a major road that separated the natives from the British interests. The round ring, the red ring there, indicates where the prison was built. And the prison essentially was built 11 years after the treaty was signed, or after they took over Lagos. It was very important to them because they spent £16,000 to build the prison, and same year they spent £700 on education in the colony. Come 1960, this is what Lagos looked like. So you can see along the coastal line where you have the European interest, or where the essentially commercial interest was established. And on the other side of the water was the harbor where all the ships exported all the products. Now, in the 80s, you can see how the native area and the commercial European interests merged. And that became a major problem because there was so much urban migration at the time, and they just couldn't essentially keep track, couldn't afford, employment was also a problem. And Lagos became a big mess because there's a lot of urban migration, and they couldn't create enough jobs. And what happened with Lagos Island itself? The business moved out. They moved out of Lagos Island, moved to Victoria Island, and now they're moving to Lekki and other areas. Rather than maintaining or dealing with problems, the government just sort of like creates new areas where business moves to. And this is all part of the oil boom or oil doom issues. All right, in 1998, like I said, the group of architects came together under the aegis of the CIA, Creative Intelligence Agency, where we thought we should look at the problems of Lagos. How do we deal with those issues? How do you deal with the congestion? How do you deal with the traffic and the life, essentially quality of life? My project was to look at creating an urban space, creating a space where people could essentially go get a breath of fresh air. I mean, Lagos was so congested that they just needed a place to breathe. And the only place that was available then was the old prison, which had been pulled down in 1972. They had built new prisons in Ikoyi and one in Abeokuta. So this, because of the development around the city, the prison was no longer viable. So in 1972, they pulled all the buildings down. This is after 100 years of operation as a prison. And what was our criteria? Our criteria was essentially threefold. One, to create the green space in Lagos Island. Two, to tell the story of 100 years of prison. Tell the history of what happened on that space for over 100 years. And so essentially celebrate the history of our independence. And then thirdly, to find, make it sustainable by inviting the arts community to take possession of the space. So we had to create a program that would essentially attract the arts community. So part of the first thing we did was to carry out our research. We were lucky to find the old plans of the prison. You can see the prison bottom right of the, or bottom left of the, bottom right, sorry, of the colored picture, and that's what it looked like before it was pulled down. So we found the old plans, and we were able to discover some of the history. A lot of our previous political leaders were incarcerated there for, who were fighting for independence at the time. So most famous was Awolowo. Others were Herbert Macaulay, Lateef Jakonde, etc. So Obafemi Awolowo was the premier of the Western region, after independence, but he was incarcerated there in the 60s, essentially for treasonable felony. We submitted the designs along with all the other projects in 1999, but nothing came out of it. But come 2009, I happened to have mentioned this project to somebody who happened to have the ear of the then governor, and I was invited to make a presentation again, and we presented Freedom Park again. Now, the idea of Freedom Park was to tell the story of what happened there without rebuilding a prison. So what did we do? We imprinted the old plan on the site and took some relevant elements, like the gallows, for instance, was where we put our main stage. We had the old prison kitchen where the food court became. The records office was now a museum. Essentially, we went from the abandoned old site, demolished site, where we cleaned out the entire site and refilled it, because it had been a refuse dump for all of 30 years. And so we embarked on 3 months of clearing out the refuse, and eventually ended up with Freedom Park. So the white building there is called Kongi's Harvest. It's where our Nobel laureate, Wole Soyinka, has offices when he is in Lagos. The building at the bottom is the main stage where the gallows used to be. You can see, all right, sorry, got the pointer here. Oops. Oops. Sorry. Now which is the, where's the pointer? All right, so that is where the kitchen, prison kitchen used to be, and that's our food court. We had, over here was the old Ministry of Justice, and here was the gallows. So we created an axis, which we called the axis of injustice, which was marked by this obelisk here. The records office is here, which now becomes a museum. And we represented the three main cell blocks, which were cell block A, B, and C, in different ways within the park. We created some soft elements, like a water body, essentially to soften the space. That's the food court building at night. And the food court essentially becomes what was like the hub of a space most evenings when there's much activity going on. So like I said, we had three main anchors on which we tied the project: the green space, the art space, and then the historical space. You can see the old plan. This is how we superimposed. We superimposed the plan, the old plan on the new proposal on the old plan. This is where the gallows used to be. The warders' compounds were here, and this was the old prison kitchen. Records office was here. There was cell block A, B, and C, which we represented in different ways. Major part was essentially, like I said, greening of Lagos, which had become so dense, where the place where people could come in, essentially feel the space, I mean, breathe clean air. And essentially, I think we achieved that. This is some of the buildings we did, and the style we tried to do was, we tried to keep an old colonial style. And that's the main entrance, the frontage of the building, the records office. That's Kongi's Harvest, the art gallery. That's, again, the records office museum building at night. And over the years, we've had different, so that's Wale Soyinka, the Nobel laureate, who essentially conducts tours himself when he has dignitaries around. We have school excursions and visiting diplomatic community. Like I said, it's an art space, and we host several festivals. We have about 14 festivals in a year, including documentary film festivals, theater festivals, poetry, and various others. I'll go on to this slide. This will play. Anyway. Well, the short film was supposed to show you some other pictures of the current activities within the park. But 2015, we won a TripAdvisor Certificate of Excellence. And essentially, well, we're still thriving. We're still hanging in there. One of the issues we have right now is that Freedom Park has become like a bit of a haven for the community, the same community that's out there, the young, unemployed youth that live within the area. Now the problem is the streets are not safe. I mean, the communities are congested and they have a lot of gang-related issues on the island. So they see Freedom Park as a bit of a haven. And they come to Freedom Park, behave very well, but they're sitting down in the amphitheater smoking weed and occasionally doping on cocaine, or not cocaine, so on codeine. And now we wonder, do we kick them out back into the streets where they're likely to get either shot by the police or by other gangs? Or do we try to, well, okay, what we're actually talking about right now is trying to engage this youth. We have artists, we have thespians, we have musicians whom we can engage, we can bring together with these kids. Because it's also within the old central business district, we have community of musicians meeting with, or community of artists meeting with the corporate sector. So we have an interface between the corporates and the arts community. And with these two, hopefully can set up a program that would be able to deal with the urban youth crisis. My 15 minutes is up. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Theo, for this interesting example from Lagos. We have a short break now, a really short break. I would like to ask you to grab a tea or coffee or whatever is there. Take maximum 10 minutes outside and we go back. And then we have the next session with Joy Mboja in my role. So be quick, please. Thank you very much.